There is a world that lies just beyond our waking lives, one that reveals itself only when the conscious mind surrenders to sleep. In that world, the realm of dreams, many mysteries unfold. One such mystery, often misunderstood and feared, is what many describe as a witch attack in a dream. It is an experience where the body feels paralyzed, the breath short, the heart pounds, and an ominous presence seems to press down with terrifying weight. It is not simply a bad dream, but something more visceral, more real. To the one experiencing it, this dream can feel like an invasion, a haunting assault, and yet, while we call it a witch attack, it is not the folklore figure that holds us captive. Rather, what we truly confront in that dream is the unspoken weight of our inner world. The witch, that dark force, is a reflection of something buried deep within us, our repressed fears, emotions, and unresolved energies. The attack is not an external curse, but an internal signal. When the body lies in sleep but the mind remains alert, it may feel as though we are caught between two worlds. In this twilight state, our defenses drop, and hidden fears, anxieties, or even suppressed memories can surge upward. They are not monsters, they are messengers. The sensation of being held down, choked, or overwhelmed is not an otherworldly being trying to destroy us. It is our own psyche trying to communicate, desperately, in the only way it knows how. So many people wake from such dreams with fear in their hearts, asking what evil has touched them, but to understand this experience fully, one must shift from the question, "What attacked me?" to "What am I running from within myself?" This is not a punishment, but a form of teaching. In the same way, our physical body aches when it is injured or neglected. Our inner being cries out through dreams when imbalance grows too great. The witch in the dream is not a villain, but a signal of tension, stagnation, or emotional turbulence. This is why such dreams often come during times of inner turmoil or change, when the mind is overstimulated, when emotional burdens go unspoken, when the soul is not given time to breathe. Sleep paralysis, which often accompanies these dreams, is the body's way of forcing a pause. The conscious mind cannot move, and in that stillness, the subconscious demands to be heard. And so, we are presented with a powerful symbol, dark, pressing, sometimes terrifying, but always meaningful. There is a reason why people across cultures, generations, and continents report this same phenomenon. It is universal, because all of us carry inner tension. All of us face moments of fear, doubt, shame, or guilt that we cannot always resolve in daylight. But in the night, in the space between sleep and wakefulness, these emotions take form. The attack is not random. It is a call to look within, to examine the energies we have not yet learned to balance. How, then, should one respond to such an experience? Not with fear, but with awareness. First, recognize it for what it is, a moment of confrontation with the self. Do not run from it. Breathe through it. Observe it. Over time, with enough clarity and calmness, you may even meet that shadowy figure in the dream and ask it what it wants to teach you. Because the true goal is not to fight the darkness, but to integrate it, to understand it, and in doing so to liberate the energy it holds trapped within you. Which attacks in dreams are not curses, they are invitations. Invitations to realign, to become aware of the imbalances in our lives, to heal parts of ourselves we may have long ignored. The path forward is not superstition, but self-exploration. Meditation, mindfulness, conscious breath, and the courage to face discomfort. These are the tools that turn fear into understanding. And so, when the next dream comes, when the night grows heavy, and that presence draws near, remember, you are not the victim. You are the witness, and if you choose to be, you can also become the master of your inner world. The witch does not come to destroy you. It comes to wake you up. When we hear the phrase, "witch attack in a dream," the mind instantly conjures images of dark forces, of sinister presences lurking in the shadows of the night, creeping into our sleep to torment us. It is an image steeped in myth, shaped by centuries of folklore and cultural storytelling. We imagine a real entity coming to harm us in our most vulnerable state. But to truly understand the nature of this experience, we must go deeper, beyond the fear, beyond the stories we've inherited, and look within. The figure we call a witch in the dream world is not a literal spirit haunting us. It is a symbol, a mirror, a reflection of ourselves. The subconscious mind does not speak in words the way the waking mind does. It speaks in symbols, in feelings, in metaphors. So when we sleep, and the subconscious becomes the stage upon which our inner truths play out, it must find imagery that carries weight, emotion, and power. The witch becomes a symbol precisely because she represents fear, repression, mystery, and power. All things we associate with the parts of ourselves that remain hidden, unspoken, or misunderstood. So, when one dreams of being attacked, paralyzed, or suffocated by a witch-like force, it is not a message from the supernatural. It is a message from within. This force arises when energy within us is blocked, or when emotions are buried too deeply for too long. That unprocessed tension doesn't disappear, it collects. And when the body rests but the mind remains alert, this collection of emotional energy tries to express itself. It takes the shape of fear because that is the easiest language for the unconscious to use when balance has been lost. It feels real because, in that moment, it is. The experience of terror, pressure, and helplessness reflects what is happening deep inside, whether or not we recognize it consciously. So many people walk through their lives carrying unresolved guilt, shame, anger, or grief. These emotions get pushed down during the day to maintain functionality, to get things done, to fulfill obligations. But the body keeps score, the heart remembers, and at night, when there are no distractions, those emotional forces rise. The witch, then, is not coming from outside. It is rising from the shadows we have created by turning away from parts of ourselves that feel difficult or painful. She is the face of our ignored truth. The ancient myths of witches, wild women of the woods, feared for their knowledge and unbound energy, have always carried a dual message. On one hand, they are depicted as dangerous and destructive, but on the other, they are symbols of power, transformation, and hidden wisdom. This duality exists within each of us. The dream witch, when seen through this lens, becomes not a monster but a teacher. She represents something powerful within us that we have feared or rejected. She is the part of the self that demands to be felt, understood, and integrated. The terror of a witch-attack dream is not rooted in the presence of evil, but in the mind's refusal to face what lies beneath. Fear grows in darkness, but if we could turn and face this figure in the dream, not with panic but with curiosity, we would see that she is not there to destroy us. She is there to force awareness. She becomes frightening only when we resist her. But if we allow her presence to speak to us, if we stay calm enough to observe the feeling instead of reacting blindly to it, a shift begins. The energy loses its hostile form and becomes a message. That message might be, you are not listening to your inner voice. You are not honoring your emotional truth. You are not living in alignment with your deeper self. The dream does not lie, it reflects what is. But we are often unprepared to meet the truth it reveals, and so it takes on a shape that shocks us awake. The witch is not here to torment us for sport. She is here because something inside us needs attention, healing, and courage. This is why it is not useful to look outside for answers when such dreams occur. It is not about spirits, curses, or external darkness. It is about introspection. What have I refused to feel? What part of myself have I rejected? Where am I out of harmony? Even in ancient spiritual traditions, symbols like the witch are not inherently evil. They are thresholds. They mark the place where the known world ends and the unknown begins. To meet such a figure in a dream is a sign that something within is calling to be acknowledged. The fear is a guidepost, not a warning to run, but an invitation to look more deeply. When you stop treating the witch as your enemy and begin to regard her as part of your own psyche, a part seeking integration, then the fear begins to dissolve. What you once saw as an attacker is revealed to be an aspect of your own power, distorted by neglect. This is the path of transformation. To go beyond fear, we must first understand it. And to understand the witch in our dreams, we must see her as a symbolic force, one born not from the shadows of the outside world, but from the chambers of our own heart. What attacks us is what we avoid. What haunts us is what we have not yet healed. But what we face with openness, with steadiness, can transform us entirely. The witch does not come to destroy you. She comes to awaken what has long been asleep. There are moments in life when we feel pressure building within us. It might not always be obvious or loud, but it's there, quietly stacking up beneath the surface. Tensions we don't talk about, emotions we don't fully understand, experiences we move on from without processing. These things don't disappear, they settle inside us, waiting. And sometimes when we sleep, when our conscious defenses are finally down, all of that weight finds a way to speak. It speaks in the form of dreams, and sometimes it screams through what we call a witch attack. People often wake from these dreams in a panic, clutching their chest, unable to move, feeling the presence of something dark pressing on them, choking them, staring at them. The instinct is to believe something has come for them from the outside, that some evil force has entered the room. But if we look deeper, if we truly ask where that pressure is coming from, we begin to understand. It is not something attacking from the outside, but something rising from within. This experience is not random. It is not an act of bad luck or spiritual punishment. It is the result of accumulated inner turmoil. When we do not deal with our stress, when we ignore our emotional pain, when we bury fear or grief or guilt, we create conflict inside ourselves. That conflict needs release. During the day, we're too distracted or too controlled to let it out. But at night, when the mind relaxes and the body sleeps, the gates open. The dream world becomes a space where that buried energy is finally free to take form. It doesn't come out gently. It often comes violently because it has been suppressed for so long. The pressure is too high and the release is explosive. That's why these dreams feel like attacks. They reflect the chaos we've held back. The body becomes frozen not because it is under magical assault, but because we are paralyzed by unresolved emotion. We feel pressure on the chest because we have carried too much tension there. We hear whispers or see dark figures because the mind is dramatizing the fears we have never allowed ourselves to feel in waking life. We tend to dismiss emotional struggles. We tell ourselves to be strong, to move on, to stay busy. And sometimes we convince ourselves that we've healed when we've only silenced the pain. But the subconscious mind does not forget. It does not let go simply because we want to move on. It waits, it stores. And then it speaks in the only language it knows, symbol, sensation, and image. This is why the witch attack in a dream is not an enemy, but a reflection. It reflects the imbalance we carry. The more turmoil we feel inside, stress from relationships, fear of failure, unresolved trauma, the more likely it is that the dream world will try to show us that pain, not with gentle whispers, but with something so vivid and frightening that we are forced to notice. The dream grabs our attention in the most dramatic way possible because during waking hours we've ignored the quieter signals. Our minds are always trying to maintain balance even when we don't realize it. When something inside us is too painful to face directly, the mind pushes it down, but the deeper it goes, the more power it gains. Eventually it spills out. Sometimes through dreams, sometimes through illness, sometimes through emotional breakdowns. A witch attack in a dream is just one form this release can take. It is a message from the deeper layers of the self saying, you can't keep ignoring this. Rather than fearing the dream, we should be asking what it's showing us. What part of our life is causing this much pressure? What truth are we avoiding? What emotion have we refused to feel because it's too overwhelming or too uncomfortable? The witch does not come out of nowhere. She rises when we've held back so much that we can't hold it anymore, and her attack is not meant to hurt us. It is meant to wake us up. In many cases, people who experience these dreams are at a turning point in their lives. They may be under extreme pressure, facing a crisis, or on the edge of a major change. The inner world reacts to these conditions even before the conscious mind understands them. The subconscious senses the turmoil and begins to push for resolution. It uses the dream as a tool to deliver this pressure into our awareness, in the hope that we will do something with it. Acknowledge it, release it, heal it. Of course, the experience itself is frightening. It feels real, intense, even traumatic. But once we realize what it truly is, it becomes less threatening and more revealing. It becomes a mirror we didn't know we needed. It becomes a starting point for inner healing. Because if we can trace the dream back to the feelings, situations, or wounds that created it, we can begin to resolve what caused the turmoil in the first place. This is why we must treat these dreams not with fear, but with honesty. Not with superstition, but with self-reflection. They are not signs that we are cursed or under attack. They are signs that something inside us has been silent too long, the which is the shape that turmoil takes when we don't face it. The dream is a reminder that it's time to look within. There's a strange and powerful moment that some people experience in the dead of night, a moment that seems to blur the lines between dream and reality. You wake up, but you can't move. You feel frozen in your body. Your eyes may be open, your breath shallow, and somewhere in the room there's a presence. Dark, heavy, threatening. You try to scream, but no sound comes. Your heart races, your limbs are locked, and the fear becomes unbearable. It feels like something is there, hovering over you, maybe sitting on your chest. For many, this experience is terrifying. It has often been labeled as a witch attack. But in truth, what we are describing is a phenomenon known as sleep paralysis, and it is far more revealing than we think. It is not simply a sleep disorder. It is a bridge between two worlds, the conscious and the subconscious. And if we can understand this, we can begin to see its deeper meaning. Sleep paralysis occurs during the transition between sleep and wakefulness, a state where the body remains in sleep mode, completely relaxed and immobilized, while the mind becomes partially or fully alert. During our REM sleep, our bodies are naturally paralyzed to prevent us from acting out our dreams. But sometimes awareness returns before the body catches up. This creates a unique in-between state, one where we are awake mentally, but physically still under the influence of sleep. In that fragile space, we don't just see the room around us. We begin to perceive things from the subconscious layer of the mind. The dream world leaks into waking awareness, and this fusion creates intense and often terrifying hallucinations. What makes sleep paralysis so profound is not just the loss of control over the body. It's the vivid presence of another world. The presence in the room, the weight on the chest, the strange sounds or sensations. All of these are projections from the subconscious. But they don't appear randomly. They reflect something about our inner world, something that needs our attention. When people experience sleep paralysis and report seeing shadowy figures or feeling an evil presence, they are not being visited by ghosts. They are standing at the threshold between the seen and the unseen. What they encounter is not some outside force, but the unfiltered contents of their own psyche. In the quiet stillness of that moment, when the mind is alert but the body is frozen, something remarkable happens. The walls that normally separate our conscious awareness from our subconscious material are thinned. It is in this space that buried emotions, unresolved conflicts, and hidden fears can rise with raw intensity. We don't encounter these things during the day because we're too distracted, too guarded, but in sleep paralysis there are no distractions, there is only stillness, and into that stillness the truth emerges. It may come in the form of a frightening figure, a heavy weight, or the feeling of being watched. But behind all of those sensations is the same truth. Something deep inside us is trying to come forward. We often describe sleep paralysis as something to fear, but in reality, it is one of the few times we come into direct contact with our subconscious mind while still being aware. This is not an attack. It is an exposure, and yes, it feels terrifying because the subconscious is not always peaceful. It holds not just our dreams and desires, but also our shadow, everything we suppress, deny, or avoid. And when it has no other outlet, it finds one in this strange twilight space between sleeping and waking. It presents itself not to harm us, but to be seen, The body may be frozen, but the mind in that moment is fully capable of learning. What if, instead of reacting with panic, we responded with curiosity? What if we observed instead of resisted? In that pause, we might begin to understand what our subconscious is truly showing us. We might see how the fear we feel is connected to past trauma or current stress. We might recognize how the presence we sense is shaped by our unresolved guilt or suppressed anger. The sleep paralysis state does not create these emotions. It simply exposes them. It pulls them from the depths of the subconscious into the edge of consciousness, and for a few seconds we are forced to face them directly. This is why sleep paralysis, though uncomfortable, can also be a teacher. It reveals what we've ignored. It shows us what we've pushed too far down. It tells us in the language of the body and the dream that something in us is unbalanced. The paralysis itself is a metaphor. Just as we are physically unable to move, emotionally we may be stuck, trapped in cycles, bound by fear, unable to express ourselves freely. The body mirrors the mind. The frozen state of sleep paralysis echoes the frozen state of our emotions, our energy, our growth. So when one finds themselves caught in that moment, unable to move, eyes open in a dark room, breath shallow, fear flooding in, it is important to realize what is really happening. You are standing on the bridge, not in a nightmare, but in a space where truth becomes visible. It may feel like you are under attack, but what you are really experiencing is a message from the hidden parts of yourself. The darkness, the weight, the fear, they are reflections of what you carry inside. And that space between dreaming and waking is not a prison. It is a doorway, one that few people walk through with awareness, but one that always leads deeper into understanding if you are willing to see what's there. When someone experiences a dream where they feel paralyzed, attacked, or overwhelmed by a terrifying presence, often described as a witch, a shadow, or some invisible force, the fear that grips them can be unlike anything they've ever felt. It's raw, it's sudden, it consumes every part of the body and mind, and what's more unsettling is how real it feels. It doesn't feel like a dream. It feels like it's actually happening. But what we fail to realize in that moment is that the fear itself is not just a reaction. It becomes a creator. Fear in these experiences is not neutral. It fuels the fire, it shapes the form. It gives power to the very thing we want to escape. The more fear we bring, the darker and heavier the experience becomes. Most people, when caught in that strange in-between state where sleep and awareness overlap, react instinctively. The body is paralyzed, the mind is alert, and something ominous seems to be in the room. And because we don't understand what's happening, our minds reach for the most immediate explanation. Something is attacking me. That thought triggers panic. Panic triggers adrenaline, and suddenly we're caught in a storm of our own nervous system. The heart races, the breath shortens, and the imagined presence in the room becomes more intense. The fear feeds it. It grows, not because it has power, but because we give it power. This is not just poetic language. It is deeply psychological. The subconscious mind reacts to emotion, not logic. It responds to images, symbols, and feelings. When we panic, we are signaling to the subconscious that danger is near, even when no real danger exists. And the subconscious answers that panic by projecting an image that matches it. So when we fear a witch, a demon, or some evil spirit, the mind delivers exactly that. Not because it's true, but because fear has made it real, at least within that dream state. What we fear most becomes what we see. That is the paradox of these experiences. The more you fear the presence, the more powerful and threatening it seems. The more you resist it, the more force it appears to have. This is because fear tightens our awareness. It narrows the focus. It stops the breath, locks the muscles, and blocks any possibility of insight or clarity. And in that frozen, reactive state, the mind has no room to recognize that it's not being attacked, it's being shown something. The dream, or paralysis, is a projection of internal tension, but fear prevents us from recognizing it as such. It makes the shadow seem external. It makes the symbol seem like an enemy. We are not trained to stay calm in the face of the unknown. We are taught to react, to run, to fight, or to freeze. But the world of dreams, especially these intense moments, requires a different kind of response. It requires stillness. It requires presence. Not the kind of presence that resists or fights, but the kind that observes. If we could bring even a small amount of awareness into that space and tell ourselves, I am not in danger. I am seeing something from inside me, the entire experience would change. The witch would not disappear, but she would lose her hold. The weight on the chest would lessen, the fear would start to dissolve, and in its place would come clarity. Fear makes the experience personal. It convinces us that this dark force is coming for us specifically. But when we let go of fear, we see it more objectively. We begin to understand that this is not about punishment or spiritual harm. It is about pressure, emotional, mental, spiritual, finding a release. And that pressure takes shape based on how we feel about it. If we greet it with fear, it becomes a monster. If we greet it with curiosity, it becomes a symbol. If we greet it with calm, it may become a message. Many ancient practices, from meditation to martial arts, teach the same principle. Fear distorts reality. It takes what is small and makes it large. It takes what is neutral and makes it dangerous. But when the mind is calm, when the breath is steady, we see things as they truly are. The witch in the dream is not a force with independent will. She is the shape of your discomfort. She is the form your anxiety takes when you're too overwhelmed to face it directly. And the more you panic, the more you empower that form. But the moment you stop feeding it fear, it loses its grip. It is a difficult shift to make. The fear feels justified. It feels automatic. But even within sleep paralysis, even within a terrifying dream, you still have a choice. You can choose not to run, not to resist, not to fear. You can breathe deeply, even if your body feels frozen. You can witness, even if your eyes are shut. And in that choice, the experience begins to change. The witch no longer dominates the dream. The fear no longer runs the mind. And what once felt like an attack becomes something else entirely. A mirror, showing you your strength through the very thing that once made you tremble. In the stillness of night, when the body lies heavy and the mind begins to drift into deep, unconscious spaces, something unexpected can rise. A figure, a presence, dark, silent, watching. It may take the shape of an old woman with sharp features and hollow eyes, or perhaps a faceless shadow, thick with pressure and dread. Many have called her the witch. They describe her as sitting on their chest, whispering, staring, holding them down with invisible force. But this figure, terrifying as she may seem, is not real in the way we think. She is not a spirit who has broken into our dreams, nor a creature from some haunted realm. She is a symbol, a shape given to what the heart and mind are struggling to contain. We often fear what we cannot name, and the subconscious knows this. It doesn't speak in language, it speaks in metaphor. When there is pain in the soul, unresolved and unspoken, it needs expression. When there is emotional heaviness, grief, regret, shame, or guilt, it searches for a doorway to emerge. And if we do not allow ourselves to feel these things consciously during the day, they find their own way to surface at night. They appear not as words or memories, but as symbols, and the witch is one of the oldest and most powerful symbols the mind can create. She is not a woman, she is not a ghost, she is the weight of all that we haven't faced. She sits on the chest because that is where we carry our emotional pain. She stares at us in silence because that is what we do to ourselves when we avoid truth. She doesn't speak, yet her presence says everything. Her arrival is not an attack from the outside, it is a message from within. But the problem is, we have been trained to take everything literally. We live in a world that trusts the visible, the material, the explainable. And so, when something unexplainable appears in a dream or during sleep paralysis, we automatically assume it must be real in the physical sense. We say, a witch attacked me in my sleep, when in fact, the mind constructed that image to express a deeper emotional reality. The subconscious does not care about facts, it cares about truth, and emotional truth, especially the kind that's buried deep, can only be brought to the surface through powerful, sometimes frightening symbols. It's important to understand that this witch figure can vary from person to person. For some, she may resemble a known face, for others, a complete unknown. Sometimes she whispers, sometimes she screams. Sometimes she does nothing at all but simply watches. This variation is not because the entity is changing, it's because each dreamer is bringing their own meaning to the symbol. Each person's emotional story is unique, and the subconscious molds the witch accordingly. She becomes the perfect reflection of the fear you've been holding back. She mirrors the emotion you've locked away. This is why trying to fight her doesn't work. You can't fight a symbol with logic. You can't banish a metaphor by shouting at it or praying over it. She is not a real enemy, she is a representation, and until you understand what she represents, she will keep returning. Not because she wants to harm you, but because something inside you is still asking to be heard. The witch is a signal, a call, a shadow that points toward healing if we're brave enough to look through the fear. Throughout history, witches have always been symbolic. In folklore, they represent the unknown, the feared feminine, the hidden wisdom, or the misunderstood outsider. In dreams, she can represent the part of ourselves we've rejected, the part that holds rage, sorrow, or power that we've been too afraid to embrace. Sometimes the witch is not our enemy, but our own energy turned against us because we've refused to understand it. She becomes twisted and dark, not because she is evil, but because she's been ignored. The more we deny our emotions, the more aggressive the symbols become. That's why the witch appears during paralysis, when we are completely vulnerable, unable to run or distract ourselves. In that frozen moment, we are forced to confront the very energy we've buried. Her presence is loud because we've been silent. Her weight is heavy because we've carried it for too long without release. But if we shift our perspective, even slightly, we begin to see her not as a monster, but as a messenger. If you wake from that dream and ask not, why did she attack me, but what am I not facing, then the entire meaning of the experience changes. The dream becomes useful, the fear becomes a guide, and the witch, rather than being a curse, becomes a key to the parts of yourself that are waiting to be acknowledged, that are crying out for healing. The human mind is mysterious, deep, and vast, and it doesn't waste energy creating vivid, emotional experiences for no reason. If a symbol keeps returning in your dreams, it means something is unresolved. The witch is not following you, she is part of you, not to haunt you, but to bring light to what you've kept in the dark. Not to harm you, but to remind you that every feeling ignored eventually asks to be seen, and it will ask again and again until you answer. When someone sees the witch in their dreams or during sleep paralysis, they usually want only one thing: for her to go away. The reaction is immediate and emotional. Escape, fight, hide. We want to break free from the pressure on our chest, open our eyes fully, run from the presence in the room. But every time we try to resist her, she returns, sometimes weeks later. Sometimes the next night. It feels like a cycle, a haunting, as if no matter what we do, she always finds her way back. But this isn't happening because the witch is more powerful than us. It's happening because we haven't learned the lesson yet. She returns because something remains split inside of us, something we haven't brought back into balance. The presence we fear the most is actually a piece of ourselves that is waiting to be integrated. Integration means to take something that was once separate and bring it into wholeness. In the world of the mind and soul, it means making peace with the rejected parts of ourselves, the parts we've denied, suppressed, ignored, or feared. The parts we're ashamed of, the feelings we haven't allowed to surface. These don't go away just because we pretend they're not there. They live beneath the surface and influence our dreams, our behaviors, and sometimes our spiritual experiences. And when those parts build up too much pressure, they erupt. Not in words, but in symbols. One of those symbols is the witch. She only feels separate from us because we haven't accepted that she is us. Not in the literal sense, but in the emotional and psychological sense. She represents what we've cast out. It could be anger we never expressed, grief we never cried through, guilt we've carried quietly, or fear we never confronted. These are the fragments that split off from our conscious identity, the parts that we hide to survive in the world. But what we hide does not disappear. It waits, and in the quietest moments, especially between sleep and waking, it returns asking to be welcomed back. This is the reason why fighting her doesn't work. Resistance keeps the division alive, and anything we resist in the mind gains power. It grows in the shadow. It becomes louder, darker, more frightening. Not because it is evil, but because it is misunderstood. The witch grows more terrifying the longer we try to get rid of her. But if we stop trying to destroy her, and instead begin to understand her, something changes. The fear lessens, the paralysis eases, the image begins to shift, because integration has begun. Imagine looking at her not with panic, but with presence. Instead of seeing a demon, we begin to see sorrow. Instead of a monster, we see memory. Instead of something foreign, we see something familiar. In this shift of perception, we allow the emotional content behind the symbol to rise to the surface. We allow the true message to come through. And when we face what's really behind the experience, not just the image, but the energy, we stop running from ourselves. That is integration. This process doesn't require complicated rituals. It requires honesty. It means asking ourselves, what am I afraid to feel? What have I buried? What parts of my story have I never allowed to come forward? And it means being willing to sit with the discomfort of those answers. That's what the witch is forcing us to do. She is asking us to stop running, to stop splitting, to sit in stillness in presence, and to finally listen to the parts of us that we've silenced for too long. Integration is not about logic. It's not about analyzing the dream to death. It's about sensing the emotional truth underneath it. For some, this might look like journaling. For others, therapy, meditation, prayer, or simply allowing a memory to resurface without pushing it away. However the process looks, the key is to stop rejecting the experience, because once we stop rejecting it, it stops needing to take such a dramatic form. The witch no longer needs to appear in the night. The symbol dissolves because its message has been heard. As we integrate, we grow in wholeness. We become more complete. We're no longer at war with ourselves. And when this happens, the inner pressure eases. The subconscious doesn't need to speak through fear anymore. It doesn't need to produce terrifying images to get our attention. We've already given it our attention willingly and gently. And when that happens, the need for the witch disappears. She fades, not because she was defeated, but because she was accepted. In many ways, the witch was never there to hurt us. She was the soul's way of showing us what still needed healing. She was the embodiment of emotional truth, dressed in a form dramatic enough to wake us up. Her power came not from darkness, but from depth. And when we meet her not with fear, but with understanding, we no longer need to fear the night. We no longer dread the paralysis. We no longer see ourselves as haunted. We realize that what we once saw as a curse was actually an invitation, a call to return to ourselves, to welcome every hidden part, and to become whole again. And so, what we often call a witch attack in a dream is not some supernatural punishment or a spiritual invasion from outside. It is a deeply personal experience, rooted in the unseen layers of our own mind and emotions. What appears as a terrifying presence is in fact a projection of something much closer to whole. Our own fears, our own pain, our own unresolved energy. The witch is not here to harm us, but to awaken us. She rises when we refuse to listen, stays when we keep suppressing, and returns when we deny her meaning. But when we stop reacting and start understanding, when we stop running and begin to face ourselves with courage and stillness, the entire landscape of the dream changes. This path is not about conquering darkness, but about recognizing that the darkness was never outside of us. It is about reclaiming the parts of ourselves we abandoned, facing the discomfort we've long avoided, and integrating the emotions we thought we had to fear. In doing so, the witch no longer holds power over us. She dissolves not because she was defeated, but because she was seen, heard, and accepted. Through awareness, understanding, and integration, we move from terror to transformation. and what once haunted us becomes the very force that sets us free.